When you think of ancient Egypt, what comes to mind? I bet it's something like this. Massive pyramids, right? Stone-faced pharaohs staring out into eternity. It's a picture of an empire built by a massive workforce, all for their god-king. It's an image of total, absolute power, a story that seems like it was literally set in stone.
And yeah, for the longest time, that was pretty much the official historical view. A 3,000-year dynasty built on, coercion and fear. A world where the powerful had all the power and the common person was, well, kind of disposable.
But is that really the whole story? I mean, think about it. Beyond the grand tombs and temples, living in the shadow of those giant obelisks were millions of ordinary Egyptians. And as we're about to find out, they weren't always so quiet.
Look, the official history of Egypt is really the history of its top 1%. It's like a highlight reel of pharaohs, their big battles, their gods, and of course, their super meticulously planned afterlives. This is the story they wanted us to remember. It's so easy to fall into what you might call the back then fallacy. We look at these huge monolithic stone carvings, and we just assume the people were monolithic too, that everyone thought the same, acted the same, all in lockstep. But people then and now are just way more complicated than that.
And this brings us to a really crucial point. There are basically two different historical records for a place like Egypt. You have the official story, carved in permanent stone by and for the 1%. And then you have the personal story, written on fragile, perishable papyrus by the other 99%. One was built to last forever. The other? Well, it was fragile, and most of it is just gone.
But here's the amazing part. Some of it did survive. And against all odds, these few texts that made it give us this incredibly rare and precious glimpse into the minds of that other 99%.
And maybe the most powerful example we have is this story called The Eloquent Peasant. Now get this, it was written around 1800 BCE, but it feels so astoundingly modern. And it just completely blows up that idea of a silent, submissive population.
So, let's meet our hero. His name is Karnak, and he's not a king, he's not a priest, he's just a regular peasant who gets totally wronged by the system, and he decides he's going to fight back, with his words.
So the plot is pretty simple. Karnak gets tricked and robbed by some corrupt, low-level official. But instead of just shrugging his shoulders and accepting it, he tracks down that official's boss, a high steward named Renzi, and he starts petitioning him. And he does this for 9 straight days, delivering these absolutely incredible speeches, just refusing to be ignored.
His argument at first is pretty philosophical. He's not just saying, hey, give me my stuff back. No, he's challenging the whole idea of justice. He's asking, look, if people in power like you just ignore brutality, who's left to stand up to evil?
Then he makes this incredibly sophisticated point. He basically argues that there's a huge difference between a poor man stealing because he's desperate and a rich official stealing just because he's greedy. He's outlining a concept of relative justice 4,000 years ago. It's just amazing. Well, as the days go on, his patience starts to wear pretty thin, and his language gets sharper, way more direct. He stops appealing to Renzi's sense of honor and just starts accusing him right to his face of being part of the whole corrupt system. I mean, this is a peasant calling a high-ranking lord a thief. The bravery is just, it's breathtaking.
And here's the absolute craziest part of the story. It works. Renzi has all the speeches written down and sends them to the king himself. And the king is so blown away by this peasant's courage and his eloquence that he orders the corrupt official to be punished, and all of his property is given to Karnak. Justice, won through the power of dissent. Okay, but what if you couldn't write a 9-day speech? What if your form of dissent was a little quieter, a little sharper, maybe a little funnier? Well, for that, we're going to turn from that fragile papyrus to a whole different kind of historical record.
Let me introduce you to a great word, ostraka. These were basically the scrap paper of ancient Egypt. Cheap, disposable flakes of stone or pottery that artists and scribes used for practice, for sketching, for doodling. And because they were completely unofficial, they were the absolute perfect place to express some, let's say, unofficial opinions.
This is a perfect example. On an official temple wall, you'd see a priest making a very solemn offering to a god. But here, on this unofficial scrap of limestone, a sly fox is playing the part of the priest, and he's making an offering to a plump goose. It's a complete flip of the natural order. The predator is serving the prey. What a sharp, witty way to comment on a powerful institution.
And this is exactly what makes satire the natural weapon of the week.
right? You can't always challenge power head-on, but you can definitely slip past its defenses with a good joke, a little caricature that secretly reveals a much bigger truth.
And these artists created entire topsy-turvy worlds. We see mice acting as masters, whip in hand, driving cats around in a chariot. We find lions sitting on thrones as if they're pharaohs. They were taking all the super serious formal roles from the tomb walls and handing them over to animals, brilliantly mocking the pomp and circumstance of the ruling class.
So, when you put these two things together, the powerful literary descent and the sharp visual satire, that monolithic stone-faced image of ancient Egypt we started with really begins to crack. And a much more complicated and frankly more human picture starts to emerge.
So what do these hidden voices really tell us? Well, they tell us that ordinary Egyptians had a really sophisticated sense of justice, and that they hated corruption. They tell us they used humor as a weapon. But I think, most importantly, they prove that the people of ancient Egypt were not some silent, oppressed mob. They were thinking, feeling, and often dissenting human beings.
And that leaves us with one last kind of tantalizing thought. These stories, these drawings, they survive by pure, dumb luck. They're just a tiny fraction of what must have existed. So it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If this is the stuff we found by accident, what other eloquent peasants and brilliant satirists have been completely lost to time?